In this video, I'm going to help you identify your number one core human fear so that you can achieve your deepest desires. What is your deepest fear? To your best knowledge right now, what's your deepest fear? And I don't want you to think super long about this. Just, what's your immediate response? Is it fear of rejection, fear of being left in relationships, fear of losing money, fear of living under a bridge? What's the fear? And the reason I want you to share what your deepest fear is because our unconscious mind needs to know what's important to us, and what we go out of our way to do is important. So when we just watch a video like this and we just listen to it, there's no signal to our unconscious mind that we want to do anything more than just listen to this information. And information never changed anybody's life. So even a simple act like saying out loud, right? I mean, this is digital, obviously, but even a simple act of writing down what your biggest fear is tells your unconscious mind, I want to deal with this, right? Or I'm at least interested in how this applies to my life. And one of the things that so many of us are doing is we're hoping that our individual lives get changed by general information. And it never will. It just simply never will. So you want to personally consume any kind of information that's going to help your life. And you personally consume it by writing things down, by interacting, by doing something to implement. And part of it is letting your unconscious mind and your body know, this is important to me. I really want to pay attention to this. Where you choose to put your focus will determine how your brain digests the information all around us. If you're constantly putting your focus on the same thing, then your brain thinks all the other things aren't relevant to you. You're not interested in them. So we literally don't see a lot of things around us, whether it's opportunities or people or the love that might be all around us. But if we keep focusing on how much love we don't have, well, the brain goes, oh, well, this one's not even interested in knowing where the love is. She or he is only interested in knowing where it's not. So, okay, well, clearly, since she's not interested in it, well, I'm not going to let her know. So where we choose to focus our information is really important and determines how we consume what's around us. So let's dive into fear. We have all these complicated problems in life if we look at all the different labels that we have: procrastination issues and perfectionist issues and time management problems and relationship problems. All of these things are fairly complicated in the sense that there's a lot of them, right? They're overwhelming. And if you were to take a look at all of the problems that you might have in life, all of the challenges that you have with whatever patterns you have, whether it's addictions or fears or sabotage or traumas or any of those kinds of things, you could probably write a list of a lot of them. If you're like most people, you could write a list of a lot of them. And there's so many labels out there that give us almost a never-ending list of things that are wrong with us, right? And then it feels so overwhelming. And I want you to think of personal development in this context kind of like a tree. I want you to think of it exactly like a tree. If you think of a tree, there's a bunch of them in the background actually, if you want to have a visual. If you think of a tree, we got all the leaves that we can see up above our eyes generally. And most of us, I would say, I don't know, I'll just speak for myself. The first thing I generally see about a tree is the leaves. And that tells me the character of the tree or what kind of tree it is. And, the tree leaves are green or orange or whatever color the particular leaves are. And the tree trunk is generally brown. So never really thought about it this way. But the trunk, there's not a whole lot of variation in the trunk. I mean, there are variations in some trees and the kinds of trunks they have and so forth. But at least with the color, not a whole lot of variation, right? but the variation is in the leaves, and there's a lot of variation in how the leaves are bunched together, set apart, and shapes and all that kind of stuff. So I think a lot of us see the leaves of the tree as the main trait of that tree. And all the things that I'm talking about right now, procrastination and perfectionism and all these fears, it's like the leaves of the tree. So if you take a look at all of these things that you feel like you've got to work on in your life, it can be incredibly overwhelming. It can be confusing. It can be scary. And it can cause some people to feel like, man, I'm never going to get off this train, right? Like, no matter where I go, I got a different leaf that I have to deal with. And the reality is that all of those leaves are coming from branches, and there are less branches than leaves. And then if we go a step further, all of those branches are coming from the trunk, and there's really only one trunk. And if we go even further than that, that trunk goes down into the earth. Then you got a bunch of roots down there, etc. But there's one root. I don't know this is exactly true with trees, but I'm going to pretend it's true with this analogy. There's one root. It's like, where do I even start? I mean, it's almost defeating to get into personal development and go, I got to work on this and this and this and this and this and this. But I want to help simplify this for you to the very extreme level of simplicity. Because I believe there's only one thing that we all are working on. So if you trace down the roots all the way down below, again, I don't think this is actually true. Maybe it is. But in this analogy, there's one root that goes deeper than all the rest. And that root is, well, I don't want to tell you what the root is yet. The complication that we deal with in all of our wrestling with personal development is because we're looking at all of these issues, right? We're looking at all the leaves. But I want you to understand that the complication is really just from the compensation. All of these leaves are compensation mechanisms. And I'm talking about the leaves of humanity, the perfectionism and time management problems and judgment and fear of not mattering and grief and all those things that we all talked about, this list. These are mechanisms of compensation. The way we deal with our pain differs, but humans pretty much have the same core pains, and I'm going to make the argument that we have one core fear. But the way your leaves show up on your tree is going to be different than the way my leaves show up on my tree. Even though we have the same core fear, the roots are different. Our cultural roots are different. Our religious roots are different. Our gender roots might be different. Where we grew up in the world might be different. Our parental roots are clearly different, right? Your parents' problems are probably different than my parents' problems. And then their parents, we've got all these family roots to deal with and all kinds of inputs of programming. So the way we compensate is different person to person. And I would say there is no person on the planet that has the same tree as anybody else. None of your leaves are the exact same as other people's leaves. Even if the experiences are roughly the same, you're still a unique tree of humanity. But we have one core fear and one obligation. And I would say one core fear and one core desire. So, here's what I believe that core fear is. Our core fear is the confirmation of our deepest wound. Our core fear is the confirmation of our deepest wound. Let me explain that. We all have our deepest wound. And I also think we share that one. I'll tell what that one is in a second. We all have our deepest wound. That deepest wound is where we start to separate from ourselves. Whenever we experience our deepest wound, we then start to separate and the compensation begins. I've never used that word. I don't think I have, at least not in this context. The compensation begins. We start to compensate or protect from that core fear happening again, or the core wound rather, happening again. And then we try to alter, generally we try to alter ourself so that wound doesn't happen again. We try to alter ourself. That's really critical language. In the form of protection, in the form of being what other people want us to be or what we think other people want us to be, in the form of a people pleaser so we can get other people's approval by pleasing them in some way, whether it's a physical way or a sexual way or just doing chores for people, favors, right? Like just being a people pleaser in all ways. Maybe over-nurturing could be a compensation tactic. What a lot of us do when we're in our wounded masculine is we try to overcompensate with achievement. Okay, so my deepest fear or my deepest wound happened and I don't want to experience that again, and clearly that deepest wound happened when I was being me, so I need to be not me. I need to be a better me. I need to be a different me because the real me just got hurt. I felt that one. The real me just got hurt. Therefore, I need to be a different, a better, or some version of not me in order to not confirm that wound. So what we're afraid of, what we're all afraid of, I believe, is returning to that deepest wound. And I believe that the deepest wound, and this is just based on 15 plus years of deep transformational coaching as well as my own journey in personal development and deep seminars. If the real me is what got hurt, then the fake me is what should be safe. So that's the beginning. That's the beginning of separation. We separate from the real me, trying to protect the real me from getting hurt again. So we say, okay, we just got traumatized on whatever level, whether it was small or big. Don't worry about it. I got us. I'm never going to let that happen again. And so a lot of us in our wounded masculine, we try to achieve so that we can become a better version of us. And if we can achieve more, then we won't get hurt. If we can make you laugh, then we won't get hurt. If we can hurt you before you hurt me, then we won't get hurt. And I'm just speaking in general now, not just the masculine. These are the ways that we try to avoid getting hurt. If we do anything that you want us to do, then hopefully you won't hurt us. That's the human journey, right? And I think all of us have some version, some combination of all of those compensation patterns. So if we try to solve our problems at the compensation level, we will never actually heal whatever it is that we're trying to protect ourselves from, right? So what we're ultimately trying to protect ourselves from, I'm trying to not say the word, or I have been trying to not say the word, but everything I'm saying is like leading up to this if it's not pointing there for you yet, which is totally fine. But ultimately, the core fear that we have is abandonment. So the fake me is the safe me. So we think. But even if we succeed at winning as the fake me, we lose at living as the real me. So our biggest fear is abandonment, because once upon a time when we were really young, we needed everybody else to take care of us. We literally needed everybody to keep us alive. We were in complete dependency. Other people had to feed us, they had to protect us, they had to shelter us. We couldn't care for ourselves. We couldn't protect ourselves. So every single one of us is wired with the fear of abandonment. It's in our DNA. And even though we were only 2 months old or 2 weeks old or 6 months old, we knew if these things all around me leave, then I will first be hungry, then I'll be irritated, then this thing that's around my butt will get full and I don't like that and I'll get itchy. And like, we have the sensations that if these things leave, I'm not going to like it. And if we've had a deeper experience of abandonment, like being left alone for hours and hours, let's say, then that DNA fear was ignited even more. So some of us have a much deeper embedded and embodied fear of abandonment because of what happened to us or what didn't happen to us, but we all have it. We just all have different levels of it. And then in my experience in transformation, what this turns into is the fear of being who we are and left anyway. So the deepest fear that I think we all share is people seeing us for who we really are, not who we pretend to be, not after we separated from our authentic self, but in our authentic self. Our deepest fear is somebody knowing who we really are, fully naked, physically and emotionally and energetically. This is who I be. It's not what I do. It's not what I show. It's who I be. And then you leave anyway. That's the core fear. Tell me if that, like, I'm in the space right now where I'm teaching and talking, but I'm feeling this so deeply in my body. It's like it feels sacred. Like I just feel this lump in my throat, like something's grabbing me from deep, deep down, and I can just tell my energy is disrupted for sure. So I think our deepest fear is somebody seeing us and really knowing us for who we are and then leaving. Which is what I said a little while ago, the confirmation. The way to make sure that nobody leaves us for who we truly are, don't ever let them see it. That's the way. Here's how I protect from somebody knowing who I really am and leaving me. I don't ever let anybody know who I really am. Now, once upon a time, none of us had that strategy because we didn't know that it was unsafe to be who we really are. And then we learned. Some of us learned it in our homes as a very, very young child, displaying our true desires around hunger or just wanting to play and dance and sing. We were shut down. Somebody left, somebody hit us, or even as a young child, somebody died. Young children oftentimes take death as abandonment because one day this person's here and then another day they're not. They're gone. So from a personal ego-driven perspective, which is really all we have as little kids, that feels like an abandonment. So since we don't ever want to be left for our core authentic self, we spend the majority, if not the rest of our lives, protecting our authentic self, as though we need protecting. Here's the paradox of all of this. Our authentic self doesn't give a damn about other people's opinions. Our true self that's based in love and based in sacred creation and based in connection and based in humanity, the core of who we are is so deep, it doesn't give a damn about the ego's playground. It doesn't care. It's so rooted in the depths of its own love and validation and acceptance that it can't even hear the people bickering up at the top about who's right and who's wrong. Think about being deep, deep underwater. We've all been underwater, I imagine, at some point. And if you were underwater and you opened your eyes and you looked up, you can't hear hardly anything above the surface. The closer to the surface you are, the more that you can hear. The deeper you go, the less that you can hear. Well, what if our true, core, authentic self is like 1,000 miles below the surface of the water? So deep that it can't even fathom what's happening up there. And what if the depths of our sea of humanity is really about nothing other than self-love? Nothing other than love in general, not just love of self, but love of all. What if deep down there, all we have is acceptance? All we have is this nurturing, feminine plus masculine union that's just beautiful on all levels. And what if deep down there, we don't even understand there is an up there? We don't even understand that there are people, are entities, egos, up above the surface of the water, because all I understand way down here is love and peace and calm and quiet. And this is all I know. So what if our authentic self actually didn't need the protection that we've spent the majority of our lives trying to protect? What if we didn't need the compensation that we've spent pretty much our entire life building? What if we don't need the walls that we're so afraid of tearing down? What if we actually didn't need the protection in the first place? See, all of these patterns are the commitment to protecting. Their commitment to protecting against us being seen as who we really are and being left anyway. The way we compensate is different, but all these patterns are protection of the real self. And I would say this, the harder the exterior, the deeper the wound. If my wound is really, really deep, then I am going to build an external bravado as a man, maybe ultra nurturing as a woman. I am going to combat the depth of my wound with the thickness of my protection. So if my wound is a mile deep, then my protection will be a mile thick. So the people that are ultra protective are protecting a really deep wound. And I just think it's all in the understanding of the balance of humanity. The deeper the wound, the thicker the protection. So we're all protecting against this thing that doesn't need it. All of these compensation patterns are unnecessary. And yet we spend our whole life fighting for them, building them. Our ego would be proud of this list. The ego that's in charge of protecting would be proud of this list. It would say, look at how much I've protected you. Remember when you got hurt on the playground when we were 5? Yeah, look at what I've done. I've turned to hate boys, or I've turned to hate girls, or I've turned to make sure that we never play again. Look at me. Check. I just protected us from that one. Remember how when we were 12, we were embarrassed that time when we tried to make a shot in basketball and we missed it? Yeah, well, look at what I did to protect us. I created a fear of accomplishment and a fear of performance, right? So you know how that was the last time you ever played sports? Right. I did that. You're welcome. Remember this time when we were 17 and we had that beautiful relationship and we were just all in love, and then he left us? So you haven't felt that since, at least to your knowledge, because I created this fear of intimacy, right? So I've done all of this for you. Where's my award? Where's my congratulations? You don't seem to be congratulating me. In fact, you seem to be trying to undo all of these things that I've done for you. And you want me to just let them go because you read a book, because you watched a Facebook Live, because you went to a seminar? I've been protecting you for 39 years. And this is the thanks I get? Nah. You can't just ask me to tear down the walls that I built for you. I've been protecting you all. You know what? Where's your loyalty? Okay. If this is how it is now, then you watch what I have the power to do. If you're not going to appreciate my protection, then you watch how deep it can get. You watch how ferocious it can be. Right. How dare you question my protection? I mean, is that not just the human journey? Right? That's the human journey. So we can't try to tear down the walls with the entity that constructed them. We're using the wrong source. Tearing down the walls is using force. A lot of us use anger and shame and threats, like against ourselves, to try to tear down these walls of protection. If you want the walls to come down, you got to love them down. You'll never out-anger your protection. You'll never out-threaten your protection. You'll never out-force your fears. But you can out-love them. And the reason is because that self-love that I talked about 1,000 miles deep, it's always been there. And everything else was built on top of it. So nothing built on top of it when we had the perception that it wasn't there. Meaning at one point in time, we lived in this place of pure safety. And then we had this experience and we decided, oh, hell, we don't have that anymore. But it was a perception. Not that the things that happened to us weren't real, they were real. But our perception of the availability of self-love, that's what's changed. I've never said that before because I've never thought it before. Our self-love has never left us, but our perception of it has changed. It's always there. And I want this to really land because we don't need to get anything from outside of us. We just need to have the guts, the willingness, the permission and the support and the guidance to go deep and find it again. That's the key. Find it again. Most of us made this shift away from ourselves before any of our conscious memories. That's why this is really challenging for most of us. Because we can't remember ever making the switch on the train track, right? You know how if you had little train sets, there's a little switch, and I think this is how they actually work too, but there's a switch and the train will be going on this track and it'll move on that track. We don't remember switching the tracks. So it's really difficult for us to go, oh, I just got to go back and change that decision because it might have been when we were like 3 weeks old. It might have been when we were 3 months old. It could have been when we were 3 years old, but we still generally don't remember that. So it doesn't make any sense to the conscious mind, to the intellectual mind, to the ego to tear down these walls because it built them at a certain point in time. But we have to have faith that once in our lives we lived without the walls because they weren't necessary. So personal development is about diving back toward the time when the walls weren't necessary. Now, I don't think any of us will ever get there. It's too much. It's too much. But we can get near there. That's the key. And the reason I say that is because as soon as somebody goes, oh, that's the answer. Okay, how do I get there yesterday? That's the ego back again, right? The ego wants to fix all the problems and they want to do it yesterday. But what I want you to understand is this is all deal withable. This is all manageable. And the liberation is actually found in the confrontation of and the deconstruction of the walls. That's where the liberation is found. But to the ego, that's where the fear is. And again, we all want to be safe, right? So the ego says, what are you doing? You are messing with safety. So let me try to wrap this up. The reason that this compensation is so damaging to us is because its core intention is to protect. And our core desire as a human is to connect. And those two can't live together. So you've got this desire from the soul raging against the compensation because the soul wants to be seen. The soul wants to be touched. The soul wants to be experienced. The soul wants to be visible. The soul just wants to be. And the soul actually doesn't care about anybody else's opinions of it when the soul knows that their opinions are based on insecurities anyway that the soul doesn't have. So if I touch my sacred energy, why would I care about what your wounded energy has to say? I don't. If anything, I love your wounded energy, and I can see the judgment or the rejection or whatever you exhibit. I can see that that's just compensation. But your wounded compensation doesn't change my sacred truth. It doesn't. And thank you for trying to compensate on my behalf as well, right? Thank you for trying to compensate me so that you don't have to compensate you. I'm good. Now, this isn't something that we just flip the switch on, but this constant challenge, this constant conflict between the desire to connect and the commitment to protect, that's everything. What some people have done, man, I don't know how I'm going to wrap this up anytime in the next 3 days. What some people have done is they've worked on diminishing the desire to connect. And the sadness is, I can feel myself starting to cry right now. The sadness is that a lot of us have convinced ourselves that we actually don't have those desires. I think one of the tragedies of a human experience is when the ego has convinced the heart that it's happy when it's not. Or the ego has convinced the heart of what its desires really are. And the ego is only interested in safety. So if I'm your protector as your ego, I'll let you know what desires of yours are safe to have or not. And I'll tell you, it's a very small list. It's a very small list. And then I become your punisher. I become the one that disapproves of your desires. And I do it for you. So don't even think about trying to confront me, because I'm doing this for you. So this perpetual conflict between what we really truly want and what makes us feel alive and what we're afraid of from the ego not wanting to be hurt again. That's the dance. That's the dance. And my invitation for any of you that are relatively new in the personal development journey is to sign up for the journey. Don't sign up for the finish line. That's what almost everybody's doing. Okay, if I read this book, can I be done with all these fears now? If I go to this seminar, can I be done with all this pain now? If I do the thing, can I be done with the thing? Yeah, no. Because it's like our human journey is really the journey back to self. It's the journey back to the moment where we first abandoned our self. So it is an abandonment issue. It's just self-abandonment. And because we don't understand that, we're terrified of somebody else abandoning us. So we'd rather abandon ourselves first. And then, I said earlier, I'll hurt me before you can hurt me. Reality is, most of us are saying, I'll hurt me before you can hurt me. And then I'll go ahead and hurt you on top of that, just to make sure we're several steps away from you hurting me. And in reality, you can't hurt me if I'm not hurting me. You can't. Not at this level that we're talking about now. You cannot. You can't abandon me because my self-love and protection is way bigger and stronger than your abandonment of me. I mean, you could leave, and it doesn't mean that it won't hurt me. It could maybe hurt me. It could disrupt me. That doesn't mean that we just walk around and go, oh, my 10-year marriage just collapsed. Oh, okay, well, no big deal. Like, I don't even have any negative feelings about it. Oh, somebody just broke into my home and stole all my stuff. No big deal. Oh, I just lost my job. No big deal. That's not what I'm saying. We will have feelings, of course, in response to missed expectations or in response to things ripped away from us that we actually want to keep. We'll have responses. But even if you're disrupted, you won't be destroyed at the existential level. You won't be destroyed in your humanity. You can't, because you have you. If I got me, you can't destroy me. But if I don't got me, you can't protect me, you can't love me, you can't fill me up, you can't make me happy, you can't bring me joy. You can't do anything for me if I don't got me. You might be able to give me little drops here and there, and I might think that's the best that I can ever experience, or that's the most that I can deserve. But if I don't got me, you can't get me. And if I got me, you can't get me. Either way, you can't get me negatively. If I got me, you can't get me positively if I don't got me. So all of this comes back to self. There was a moment that we all abandoned ourselves. Personal development journey is about going back toward that moment. Shit, man, you see how it's lighting me up right now? That's it. It's going back toward that moment, knowing that you might not ever reach it in its entirety. But you could get there with relationships. You could get there with money. You can get there in certain areas of your life. And even if you don't get to the finish line and break through the tape, you can get closer. And the closer you get, the closer you're getting to yourself, the closer you're getting to love. I mean, isn't it worth it anyway? I don't want you to sign up for personal development because you know it's going to work for you. I want you to sign up for personal development because you know you can't not. Because you know you can't not. We all have a little kid inside of us, and that little girl or that little boy does not need to know that we will achieve all of his or her dreams. She does not need to know that. And he does not need to know that. He does not, because he's a sacred being. She gets it. She gets life. She's coming from that deep, deep, deep sea of humanity. So she doesn't expect you to get all of her dreams. She doesn't expect you to perform your way into her love. She loves you anyway. He doesn't expect you to be able to protect everything, to impress him. He loves you anyway. He doesn't, and she doesn't expect any of our conditions to be met. And he and she don't need to know that we are going to achieve all of their dreams. But they need to know that we'll try. That's all they care about. You don't have to do, but you have to try. You have to come back for me. You have to come back for me. That's what these tears are right now. You have to come back for me. Come back. The natural human desire when we see a burning building is to run away because we're afraid of the fire. But what if your child was in the middle of that house? How many of you are running away? What if somebody you know and care about, or a pet, or just anything at all, is in the middle of that fire? You're not running away. You're running in. And there are things that we care enough about that running into that fire and dying anyway is a better choice than walking away and never trying. That's what's at stake here. And the fire is all of this compensation. It's all the compensation. It's the mind's way of trying to protect us. Because once upon a time, that little child inside there, which is us, was left. And that's when we started the fire. We did. To make sure that nobody else can reach us and leave us again. But we keep building the fire and walking away, and we're on the opposite side of the same fire. That's personal development. Our core fear is being seen for who we are and being left anyway. Therefore, we compensate with all these things to try to make sure that nobody sees us for who we are and then leaves us. But the big tragedy in that is we don't see who we are. And the paradox is the best way to get people to really, truly love you, protect you, be loyal, want to help you, never leave you, is by showing them who you really are. And the journey back to that is personal development. Now, if you like this video, check out that video right there where I'm going to break down the single most important concept in your success. And I want people to hear that with hope, because it can change. That's the key here, right? This isn't like you were just born with a certain set of